At selfpublishing.com, we've done over $75 million in sales and 8 figures a year. That's not by accident. That's by design. Okay, that's over $30,000 in sales every single day, because when you understand how to get customers fast, consistently, and at scale, everything changes. So most founders, when they think about getting customers, they chase, instead of designing systems that attract. The truth is, customer growth is not about luck, it's about clarity. This is the first pillar in our 8-figure profit bridge. Okay, so just as a reminder, if this is the first video that you're seeing, there are 5 steps in this 8-figure profit bridge. You need to execute these in order to scale to 8 figures. The first one is the columns of this bridge, and that is paying customers. So in this video, we're gonna talk about how to get customers so fast it feels illegal, and so many customers that it feels illegal. How do you do it at each step of the process, starting from basic principles? I'll never forget when I launched my first business. We launched a book all around productivity. It started doing pretty well, and we said, hey, we should create a business out of this. All right, and then on the back end, we said, all right, we're gonna create some kind of course business. Now, the first thing we did is probably what you do as well. We listened to every guru talking about funnels, talking about all these different steps. We went in the lab. We dropped 15 grand up front to build out this complex funnel. You got the tripwire, you got the lead magnet, you got the upsell, you got all of these things, right? I remember we went into the ETV studios. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. Is that still around? ETV, and we filmed the course. We're so proud of it. The next month, we launch it to crickets. I kid you not, I do not know if we have sold one copy of that course to this day. What I found out from that experience is that if you build it, they will not come. You have to tell them about it. All right, it's also taught me 2 important things. The first one is the only 2 things that entrepreneurs should focus on. I'll tell you about that in just a second. And then the second one is pre-selling. All right, I'll also teach on that. That was the biggest mistake that I made. I'll tell you why you should do it, what to do instead of what I did, all that stuff. But the big mistake that most people make is they don't do the work that it actually takes to get paying customers up front. Let's dive into that. So let's start with the only 2 things worth spending time on in your business. All right, number 1 is getting new customers. Number 2 is making customers happier. That's it. Nothing else, okay? These are the only 2 things you should be spending time on as the founder. This is also the only 2 things that your team should be spending time on. So I want you to ask the question, if someone looked at your calendar, would they see these 2 things? All right, would they see customer acquisition and making customers happier? And especially at the start, when you have no customers, well, guess what? There's no customers to make happier, right? So you don't need to be spending time on that. You need to be spending all of your time getting new customers. There's a quote that I love. It's been attributed to Henry Ford. It's been attributed to a bunch of other really smart people. We don't know who said it. We do know that a bunch of the most successful people have said it. And the quote is this: nothing happens in business until something is sold. If you don't have sales, you don't have a business. You have a business idea. And so while most people think about, I need to get the logo, I need to get the website, I need to get the LLC, none of those things matter until you have paying customers. Nothing happens in business until something is sold. Those are the only 2 things you should be focusing on. And the first one is getting new customers. But how do you do that though? How do you get your first or your next 10 paying customers? This is the part that trips a bunch of people up. Now, I was at a bachelor party recently, and we were on the beach and we were looking out, and we saw this lady paddleboarding. She was trying to get kind of out past the wash. She's got kind of a headwind. She's trying to get out past the wash. She keeps paddling, she keeps paddling, she keeps paddling. 20 minutes go by, she's stuck in the same exact place. And she's got these waves and winds that are pushing her back. We looked over and her whole family is on the beach like, Mom, get on your knees. She's standing up, still going. And meanwhile, we see that her friend had just dropped down onto her knees, so there's less wind hitting her. She paddled and she got out there faster. And I thought about this. I'm like, this is exactly what people are doing in business. There's the waves and wind of the marketplace that are pushing you back or keeping you in place. They're keeping you from getting your first or your next paying customers. And a lot of entrepreneurs, maybe you as well, are just staring into it, just paddling harder and thinking, if I just paddle harder, I will get further. No, you need a better way. So there's 2 things I noticed from this story. The first one is her friend had already done it with a different strategy, but she wasn't paying attention to it. Right? There's this concept I love. It's called who, not how. It says anytime I run into a problem in my life or in my business, I ask the question, who has solved it before, not how do I do it? So if I just find the who, that was her friend. She had done it smarter. And then secondly, her family was yelling at her, but she couldn't hear them. Maybe you're watching YouTube videos, or you're getting advice from folks, but you're not really hearing it. All right. So do you want to be like her? Do you want to find a smarter way? I think you probably want to find a smarter way. That smarter way is this thing called pre-selling. Simply put, it's sell, then build. Sell, then build. That means validating your idea before spending money on it. So I want to tell you what I did that was different from the first time I tried to launch a business. The first time, like I said, we spent all this time, all this money, all this energy. We created the thing that nobody wants. Pre-selling is going to the market, asking them what they want. What are the problems that you have? What are the pains that you have? How could I solve that? And if I solved it this way, would you pay for it? Okay, getting them to put down their credit card and then building it. I did this when I created the first iteration of what's now selfpublishing.com. So we had this failure under our belt and we said, all right, well, that clearly didn't work. But meanwhile, all of these people kept asking us about how to write and publish a book. I had done it successfully multiple times. They keep asking about it, keep asking. It's kind of one of those things where somebody can only smack you in the face so many times before you turn around and look. And you turn around and look and there's this whole line of people there. So what I'd ask you is, what's that thing that people are already asking you about that you're probably ignoring? That's where the money is. All right. But besides that, we said, all right, there's clearly something here. Let's see if we can pre-sell this. So we did a series of webinars. We did, I think, 4 webinars in 4 weeks. We got as many people as possible onto those webinars. And then on the webinar, we taught a ton of stuff. And then at the end, we said, hey, for the first time ever, we're going to teach people how to do this process. It'll be the cheapest it's ever been. We're going to do it, with you. So you'll have the most access to us that you ever will. We've never done this before. We've obviously done it successfully ourselves. We're going to do it with you. I think you're going to love it. So super transparent, super upfront, super open. Guess what happened? $84,000 in sales in a month. So from nothing in sales to $84,000 in a single month, that's the power of pre-selling. So my question for you is, what are people already asking you for help on? Start with that. Pre-sell that thing, sell, then build. Now, pre-selling works whether you've already got paying customers or whether you don't. All right. So if you don't have your first paying customers, you got to do this. But maybe if you're already at 6 or 7 figures, you want to launch a different product, a line extension, something to drive renewal or repeat business. You can do that as well. We just recently did this. These are beta programs is how we launched them. We just did this for a TEDx program. We sold it and now we're building it directly with people to help them book their own TEDx talk, just like I've done to explode their business. So you're convinced on the concept of pre-selling. Now, how do you get customers? Well, you only need 3 things to get your first customers. People make this complicated. It's not that complicated. First off, you need something to sell. Secondly, you need people who express interest. These are maybe leads or warm intros, that sort of thing. Thirdly, you need paying customers. Okay. And this is a person with a problem who's willing to pay to solve it. That's it. You don't need a fancy funnel. You don't need a website. You don't need an email follow-up sequence. And then you need to just get on the phone with them. Or what is the fastest path to turning them into paying customers? Now, what if you don't have something to sell, or maybe you're in this boat where you're selling some stuff, but it's not really working? Well, there's 3 types of things that you can sell. First off, physical products, right? Pretty straightforward. These are maybe supplements, food products, merchandise, a book, anything physical. The price range on this is somewhere between $5 to $500. Secondly is digital products. These are often much higher margin. Okay, so this could be $50,000 to $25,000, maybe even more than that. It might be software. It might be coaching, one-on-one or group coaching. It might be consulting, so paying for advice. It might be online courses. And then thirdly, I think this is often ignored. It's the non-sexy option is services. This is a service-based business. Maybe it's an agency. Agencies can be really profitable. You've got 5 customers paying you $3,000 a month. Well, guess what? Now all of a sudden you've got $15,000 a month in revenue and repeat business. Right? Maybe this is speaking as a service. Maybe it's brick and mortar. Everybody's sleeping on brick and mortar, but there's a ton of 6-figure plumbers, electricians. So services are somewhere between $1,000 to $100,000 plus. These are often the easiest first things to sell because people need the service, right? They need to pay someone to do the thing. So those are the 3 types of things that you can sell. Now I want to give you some examples from people we've coached through this process. Because really what we want to do is we got to get our message in front of a target audience and then in that process convince them to buy. That's it. Okay? I know it sounds simple, but that's really all you got to do. So I want to tell you about Kate McKay. So Kate launched a book with us. Okay, now this book is doing good. Now she says, okay, I want to launch a coaching business off the back end of this. So the first thing that we said is, okay, how can we get you in a one-to-many situation? So where you're not going one at a time. Like my very first business, I was knocking on one door at a time, going door to door, selling paint jobs to paint people's houses. That's pretty inefficient. So you don't want that. How do we instead have a one-to-many sales mechanism? Well, that's a webinar, right? Or maybe that's going to speak at an event. Maybe that's doing affiliate stuff. We'll kind of talk about some of this stuff later. But so Kate said, all right, I'm going to host a webinar. I'm going to get as many people as possible that are in my target audience to that webinar. So she, I think maybe got 50 people in the webinar, maybe even 100. And then she got tens of thousands of dollars in sales within a week from that webinar. So that's a really good example. If you're trying to get a proof of concept for your first paying customers, that's how you do it. And so this is your homework from this video. Now remember, we're working on the columns here, okay? So this is like the first infrastructure for this 8-figure profit bridge. The columns are paying customers. So your job is to get on the phone with 10 people who can pay to work with you. That's exactly what we did when we launched what is now selfpublishing.com, right? We got a bunch of people to buy through these webinars and stuff, but then we did this thing called Why Didn't You Buy calls. Okay, this works like crazy. And so with all the people who didn't buy, we said, hey, we'd love to get on the phone with you for 15 minutes and just learn, how you heard of it, what you thought of it, and why you decided not to work with us. You wouldn't believe what happened on that. I'll never forget. I was launching the business. I think I was in, Australia or maybe New Zealand at the time. And I'm getting up at 3 a.m, taking all these calls, 15 minutes at a time, back to back. And what ended up happening is we learned all of the biggest objections, right? And also, by the way, a bunch of people just signed up on those calls. Like they're giving you their objections. And then you say, okay, well, here's how we can overcome that. Visa or Amex, do you want to work with us, right? And so we ended up making a lot of sales, but it also was the most valuable thing that we did for our marketing, because then the next time we got in front of prospects, we now had their language. And so we used their language to communicate directly to them in the form of our marketing. And people started thinking, hey, you're reading my mail. How did you know that? How did you do that? All right, so that's how you get your first paying customers. Let's dive into kind of this concept of one-to-many leverage, okay? And this is kind of like the fast track. It's the cheat code, whether you have customers or not, is how do you get in front of as many people as possible so that you're going one-to-many instead of one-to-one? So there's kind of a few ways that I like to do this. There's a few areas that I look for one-to-many leverage. Okay, there's PR, there's affiliates, there's a book, and there's speaking. All right, I'll break down each one at a time. So PR, this is maybe you've got paying customers, but you want a lot more leverage. So remember I said I was knocking on doors one at a time to sell paint jobs. So every time I would walk up to these houses, I'd realize, hey, I just walked by a mailbox. What's in every one of these mailboxes? A paper. So I'm like, hold up, how can I just get in the newspaper? Because then that's 30,000 people in my town that I'm getting in front of with one act. So then I spent the next 4 weeks or so, I spent an hour a week reaching out to every person at every newspaper in the local area, landed a story, boom, the business started growing like crazy, right? Because now people are seeing the thing and seeing the story and calling us. Now also when we are door knocking, we're like, hey, you may have seen us in the paper, right? So it just gave us way more leverage. So local PR, the ultimate cheat code for local businesses or any business. Also, if you're more of an online business, well then cool, get on as many podcasts as possible, right? That's one-to-many. Secondly is affiliates. So this is what we did to get that $84,000 in sales in our first month is I had 2, maybe 3 partners. These are people with an audience. So the question I would ask here, and we're going to talk about this in a later video in this series, but is who is already talking to my ideal customers? Well, how do I just get them to put me in front of their audience and I add value, but then obviously also it leads to them working with me. So we had 2 or 3 affiliates. They helped us pack out the webinars. We paid them per customer that they sent us. All right, that's number 2, affiliates. Number 3, a book. All right, obviously I'm kind of speaking my own book here, pun intended. We teach this all the time at selfpublishing.com, but a book is the ultimate way to create leverage. You create this thing that then goes on to impact thousands, tens of thousands, maybe even millions of people, right? It brings back leads, sales, and referrals. My book back there has brought in $7 million in sales over the last year. People read the book, they book a call with my team, they sign up to work with us. I got a whole training. It's a top secret training on our channel over there at selfpublishing.com, all about what I call the $7 million business card. So a book, it's extremely high leverage. Check out the training if you want to learn that. Number 4 is speaking. Okay, this is a big one. This is speaking in person in front of people. You can obviously do online webinars as well. But I remember when we were getting self-publishing school, is what it was called at the time, off the ground, we were starting to scale. My friend Pete Vargas said, Chandler, you got to speak. I said, all right, well, I do webinars. Why would I want to speak? He said, well, in person is a whole different ballgame. And so I said, all right, I'll give it a try. I was living in San Diego at the time. There was a conference down the road a friend of mine was running. There was 27 chiropractors in the room. Super small conference, good buyers. And so I walked in there and I said, oh, I'll teach you about how to write and publish a book that grows your chiropractic practice. Okay. And I remember driving 15 minutes down the road, giving an hour-long talk, and then walking out an hour later with 9 order forms at $2,000 a piece. I'd done $18,000 in an hour. It was the most insane thing ever. To me at the time, it was like, oh my gosh. Then I went to the beach. So in a half a day on a Saturday, we just did 18 grand in sales. It was life-changing. We'll talk about this in a future video. We got a bunch of trainings about how to get booked and paid to speak and all that stuff. But speaking is a really great way to get one-to-many leverage, whether it's your first customers or your next 6 or 7 figures in revenue. We've done about 5 or 6 million over the last year in my business just from speaking at events. Okay, so that's the framework on how to get customers so fast that it feels illegal. I realize maybe if you're more advanced and you're maybe more in the 6, 7 figure area trying to get to 8, this was maybe a little bit elementary. That's the point. All right, because we got to go back to first principles. In the next video, we're going to talk about the one thing that every 7-figure founder gets right. Okay, and the people, especially the 8-figure founders, they really get this right. You can muscle your way to 6 figures. All right, you can maybe muscle your way to 7 figures. You won't last, it won't sustain if you're missing this thing. It's called product market fit. I know it sounds pretty boring. It sounds like something you would read in a textbook in business school. I promise you it's not. It's actually the key to the whole thing. Okay, because if you don't have product market fit, you don't have a business, you don't have really anything that will scale or sustain. This is the bridge, okay? The bridge here is product market fit. The stronger the product market fit, the more weight this can support. All right, and so we've got our first paying customers. These paying customers start to build the foundation that we can put product market fit on. So you're already finding out about that if you're doing the things that we talk about in this video, but then how do you build on that and create what I think is the most important part of this process, product market fit? We'll walk you through exactly what you need to do in the next video. I'll see you there.